some lights. One more light. Well, too bright. As you heard, my name is Daniel Forster, and the last time I spoke was at Jane Pickens, and the governor was there. And so I said, I'm Daniel Forster. I live in Jamestown, Rhode Island. I'm from Switzerland, but I live in Jamestown, Rhode Island legally. Oh, that's better, right? So I arrived here from Switzerland in '88, lived in Newport, and now the last 12 years in Jamestown. And as you just heard, I'm celebrating 40 years of Forster yacht photography. Has been a long way. The first Olympic Games were in 1977, and I've done them all except the China Games. And the first America's Cup I did was in 1977, as you will see in a minute here. Quick question: how many photographers are around here? And how many sailors? So there's more sailors than photographers. I have a show for photographers and a show for sailors, so tonight is the sailors show. Just to make sure that maybe next year we do a photography show. And two things. First, when you have a question, just yell it out, because if we ask the question in 40 minutes, we might forget what the picture is all about. And that's basically it. Just to make sure that you know where I'm from. These were the days I lived next to a farm, and of course this is my it's not my desktop picture, but my opener. The America's Cup and sailing photography in particular, if you're not there, it never happened, because we sailing photographers, we feel like we're bringing the pictures back to shore, because there's spectator boats, but it's very hard to go out there and go out in the waves and see the photography, to see the races going on, and to be at each mark, where we're going to each mark with the photo boats. We're in the first line of attack, not of defense, and so we're very lucky. And I always thought I could sell spaces on my photo boat for a lot of money, because it's so you can almost touch the boats, you can hear the winches, you can hear the commands. I feel very lucky to be able to have done that for the last 40 years, as I said, and going out in the morning to the race course is one of the nicest things in my life, because I leave the office behind, and they still can reach me with the phone, but I don't have to call back, and I'm out there, and I can see things people will never see, and that's why we're taking pictures of it. So we'll bring these pictures back to shore. That's one of the examples. It's if you have to be there and be ready. These two things: if you're there and you don't have a camera, you've seen it, but you can't bring it back. That was in Perth during the America's Cup in '87, where a jib split, and you'll see later on that sail making changed a lot since 1977. But here, that was a double-sided jib. One part just split in half, and the other part was still pulling. I was on board with. We're still online. You don't want the latest news. I'm looking for. That's interesting. So. And off we go. So that was in Perth too. It was one of the few times I was on board when the mast came down. It was Team New Zealand, and this time that was in Auckland. When that's the photo boat down there. I was in the helicopter, and actually the French boat got pushed out. If you sail, you know what that means. They both came to the starting line is here. They both came to the starting line, but there was no room for the French boat to start, so he had to do a circle and start again. And the photo boat was right here, and I was glad I wasn't on the boat when that happened. But it was great to be in a helicopter and see and watch my friends running. This is an iconic picture too, because there was a training race in San Diego in '92, and America Cubed, as you heard, I was the official photographer, Bill Koch, in '92, and then the women's team in '95. And I was in the back of the boat of America Cubed with Bill Koch steering, and I look back, and the backstay came apart, and here you can see what can happen if you're in the wrong place at the wrong time. And luckily Dennis Conner, who is here, was not tall enough to get hit by, and the mast came down, obviously. Speaking about Bill Koch, that was the first sail in 1991, actually before the 1992 Cup, where they went out sailing, and I was the official photographer. And that's Jerry Kirby. Going back, that's Jerry Kirby on the bow, and Bill Koch on the helm. Another picture of Bill Koch, as you imagine by now. I've been taking pictures when he had the Matador 1 and the Matador 2 maxis, and then 92 and 95. So it was quite a trip. And then being the photographer for the women's team with 36 women and one photographer. But as you know, the last race there was a navigator, Dellenbaugh, came on board to help them too. Another icon, Olin Stevens with his brother, they designed 8 America's Cup winners, and that's a picture taken in 2003. So 1977, these were the days when Ted Turner was racing, and the good old days. I was still living in Switzerland. The America's Cup was they sailed here every weekend to have selectors selecting races for the defenders, and Ted Turner defended with Courageous. These are all slides. Obviously, I had to scan. And the pictures are taken from the blimp. It was you remember the Goodyear blimp, maybe? And I just went to the airport. I was here for 2 weeks. I came from Switzerland. I went to the airport and said, any room on the blimp? And he said, well, come by tomorrow. We'll see. And so these were the aerial pictures I got. I couldn't afford a helicopter or a plane. And that's Newport, 1977. No advertising, as you notice. These were the clean days. And on Castle Hill, another historic picture. If you see it now, it has a tower, and they shaved the sail number of the American boat into the. Am I close enough to the? I just remembered. They shaved the sail number into the lawn at Castle Hill. Sailing was always hazy, and we had days, more than one days, where they canceled because of the fog. This was Newport. That's from the blimp too, and as you know, Courageous won it. And when they came back in the harbor, we've never seen that since '77. The people were on the roofs of the buildings, cheering for Ted Turner. He's in the back here. The harbor was full of people. And if you've seen pictures of the compounds these days, but the boats were all hanging up here, ready to go sail. It was very provincial at that time. America's Cup 1980 was very uneventful. I came the week before, and I sailed on board with Ted Turner, who lost the selection. Another interesting person was the Baron Bick. He came here with France. He lost one race because he got lost in the fog. And he always sailed in his white outfit, white hat and white dress, white suit. The other interesting part were the Australians thought about the bendy mast. And they actually did quite well until they lost. And even if you see the American exploded the spinnaker and still won or defended the America's Cup. 83, that's Ted Kennedy was there. That was a big event. It was the first time where they put skirts on the boats. And again, as you see them, today it's unbelievable. There was the Australian boat, there was the Canadian boat, the Italian boat, the French boat. They were next to each other, and in the morning the crew came and cleaned the boats, and they went sailing. These were the good days. Liberty was ahead in one race, and everybody was cheering at that time, but things went downhill from there. There was one strong wind race where actually the Australians broke the top of the mainsail, and as you can see here, the boom is on the deck, whereas the boom is about 3 feet off the deck here on the American boat, but they still won that race. That's the Coast Guard Eagle in the background, and the finish where Dennis Conner got banned from the New York Yacht Club. Big celebration for the Australians. Alan Bond has been trying quite a few years in a row, or a few events in a row. And that was the evening when they came into it was just behind the docks in Newport. That's the designer here dancing on the back of Australia. And here is Dennis Conner in the New York Yacht Club hat. And apparently he cried when he was there, standing and watching. That's John Bertrand, the helmsman, and Alan Bond. And then they hoisted the boats, and the crowd yelled, "Lift the skirt," and Alan Bond gave the signal. And we finally saw the keel, the real keel. As you see, the keel was actually painted, so if you went spying with a plane or a helicopter, you wouldn't see the exact shape of the wings. That was the start of the winglets. Big celebration at the press office with the whole team. That night I was one of the photographers who worked for Sports Illustrated as well. So right after that picture, I collected the film from all the photographers. There were 3 or 4 photographers there for Sports Illustrated, and I took a little boat, if you know, in Newport, back to Goat Island across the water. They had a motorboat ready, and then a helicopter from Goat Island all the way to New York, and then a taxi into the office, and it was all Ektachrome film. So I waited 2 hours till they processed the film, and then I took the Kodachrome film for Sail magazine and went to Rochester, not Rochester, New York. It was a Kodak lab, 2 hours out of New York, so we could process the Kodachrome film, because for the photographers here, Ektachrome is okay, but Kodachrome was the top film to use for magazines because the colors were so much stronger. So it was quite a day and quite a night and another day while they celebrated outside in Newport. 87 was quite different. Perth, Australia. It was the best, windiest event ever. This is the Buddy Melger's boat from Chicago, and as you see here, they broke the spinnaker pole, lost the spinnaker, broke the spinnaker pole, hoisted another spinnaker, and then lost a man overboard, and that was the end of their racing for the day. I was on board with one day with the New Zealand team, and another interesting thing, they didn't have a clothing sponsor, as you notice. Everybody owned their own clothing. They had funny underwear, and that's definitely not Adidas. In the meantime, Dennis Conner went out. That's a training day where it was too wild to race, and he went still out and raced there. The waves were terrific, and that was in Western Australia. People didn't know where Perth was before the America's Cup, and it's just one city in Western Australia, 6 hours flight away from Sydney, but they had the Fremantle Doctor. That was the name of the wind, and every morning at 11 o'clock, at 10 o'clock it was as flat as a lake, and at 11 o'clock the wind comes in 25 knots, and 4 o'clock in the afternoon the wind is gone. It was a thermal wind which came every single day. Dennis Conner wins. That's the Louis Vuitton Cup. Just I could sell it as the victory, but it's actually the Louis Vuitton Cup, but it's a good picture. Never let a good picture in the way of a good story. So, and that's how it looked when they came back. The Australians went crazy. People, if you think there's 7 million people in Western Australia, but 6 of them live in Perth, and they were all there. That's a cameraman with the sound man in his little boat. These were the days. So a few days later, we actually Continental Airlines gave Stars and Stripes a plane to fly from Perth to San Diego, and the mayor was there. Had a little ceremony, because in the meantime, since Dennis Conner got kicked out of the New York Yacht Club, he was a member of San Diego, so the San Diego Yacht Club won the America's Cup. And then from San Diego, we went straight to Washington, and Reagan had an invitation at the White House for us, and then Donald Trump paid for a parade. Good old Donald is still kicking, and that's the mayor of San Diego, and that's Koch, the mayor of New York, and we had a parade down 6th Avenue, up 6th Avenue, with the Cup and Dennis Conner, and I had a cover. And if you have time, the little story is that 3 days before they made the decision, they called me and said, Gorbachev had a big deal going in Russia. We might change, so I could be up there in the little corner. And it's definitely a game changer, and that's how lucky I got. 88 was the year of the big ship. The New Zealanders found a loophole and said, we're coming with 140 foot, the maximum allowed in the rules. They dug in the old rules from 1851, and they found a loophole, and they had, said, we're coming with a big, and so 140 footer. So the Americans went back and said the only way we can defend is with a cat. Interesting thing is the advertising too. That's not allowed anymore these days. So they defended with a cat, and obviously a cat is faster than a monohull, even if it's 3 times the size and the length. And as you maybe know, Herreshoff went back and said they had a cat design in the America's Cup way back. There was a lot of legal discussions going on if you can defend with a cat. But to have 40 people on this 140-footer was quite a sight. 92 was the cup where money was nobody asked how much it cost. They all said you have just to do it. And that's when I can tell you a story about Larry Ellison a few years later, quite a few years later, where when he had a meeting, one of the designers said, "Mr. Ellison, I was able to, for the next project, to save $80,000 on the project." And Larry Ellison looked at him and said, "I hired you to win the America's Cup. I didn't hire you to save me $80,000. And that was the end of his... Anyway, back 1992, Bill Koch had 3rd models built and water tank testing going on for a few months. He built 15 of these models and tested them all. 2 of the boats were built here in Rhode Island at Guts, and because the timing, we flew them with the Russian cargo ship to San Diego from the airport from Quonset, actually. They were driven to Quonset and then flown to San Diego. The closest, that's 1 second between the Italian boat and the American boat in 1992. Closest finish in the America's Cup. And this is Paul Caillard in the Moro di Venezia. Bill Koch invented the Cuban, like America Cube, not like Cuba, the Cuban sailcloth, the gray sailcloth you see here. It was his idea to make a much stronger and lighter cloth. At the day he won the America's Cup, he jumped in the water and swam to the dock and grabbed the America's Cup. And now look, that's 1992. Look at the cameraman. And that's 1995. Same cameraman, a different winner, Russell Coates, at the San Diego Yacht Club. 1995 was the year of the women. The women's team, Bill Koch said, "I won it, I defended it, I need to do something different." And for the photographers, I'm standing on the outside of the spreader here. That's my elbow here with a wide-angle lens. That's my shadow. And I organized, I said, we have to have this spinnaker and Aaron up the mast. Everybody said San Diego has no wind, it's boring, and that was the day they canceled because there was too much wind. And one guy had to go up there. The mainsails are fixed before the racing on the top of the mast. So a guy had to go up there, take it down, but he lost his grip, and he banged against the mast, and a second guy had to go up there and pull him down. So that's light wind San Diego. In the Defender Challenger races, Young America had a boat designed by, or actually painted by Lichtenstein, Roy Lichtenstein. And again, this is, it's all about being there and being ready to take the picture. You see the guy on the bow hasn't even seen the guy going overboard. This is an interesting picture. You probably heard about the Australian boat cracking in middle. Personally, I never gonna sponsor a boat anymore. They misspell my name and then they sink it. So back to the women's team. That was a great experience. I went there for 6 months every month for a week, and then for the last 5 months I was in San Diego on board with them during the training. That's Leslie Egnott. She's from Australia, famous for 20 sailors. And that's Paul Kayar behind there. And here is Paul Kayar on the wheel and Dennis Conner on the winch. The women's team unfortunately didn't make it, but it was an incredible experience. They were as good as the men. It was just I don't know if you remember that, the last race of the Defender Series, they were 8 minutes ahead at the last mark, and all they had to do is go downwind to the finish, but there was no wind. So they went one way, and Dennis Conner went the other way, obviously, and when they came back together, Dennis Conner found more wind on one side, and this is the result, and that's why Dennis Conner defended. But at least the women's team can say we never lost the America's Cup. And the story goes on. The Stars and Stripes from Dennis Conner was not a fast boat. He was just a good sailor or a good sailing team. So he asked for the boat from Young America. So the Stars and Stripes team sailed on the boat Young America and still lost. That's Team New Zealand taking the cup to New Zealand. 2000 was the year where Sir Peter Blake was on the boat, and every day he was running the operation. I don't remember. I don't know if you remember. He was sailing hero, tragically killed in an expedition. But every race he was on board with his Red Sox, they won. And so they had a collection. They sold Red Sox as a fundraiser, until they found out that the wool came from China and not from New Zealand. So that was the end of that. Again, the boats were flown in. Time obviously is money, and that's the America One boat flying in to New Zealand. The weird thing about the selection races in 2000 were that the selection races were in strong wind, and then the real racing was in light wind, so you had to have 2 boats, and not every boat made it. Young America cracked in half, and luckily they could save it, and they actually fixed it and raced it later on. But it was a sad day. This is the last race of New Zealand winning against Prada, who won the Louis Vuitton Cup, the selection races for the and here is Team New Zealand, who defended it against the Prada, who was the challenger. And these were the good day. The designer, one of the designers, Schnackenberg, is still with Team New Zealand, and Russell Coutts is with Team New Zealand. But things changed quite a bit. The money kept flowing, and the Swiss arrived. Ernesto Bertarelli bought about Russell Coutts and half of his team. And a little insider story there, there's many stories, but one of the stories or the rumors is that Russell Coutts said, I didn't want to leave New Zealand because they helped me so much, but I just asked so much that he would say no. And Bertarelli said yes. And that's why Russell Coutts is a millionaire. So that's the keel of the Swiss boat with the winglets, and that's the keel of the New Zealand boat with the winglets. And as you see, a complete different approach between the two. And that's the Italian boat, Prada. Interesting spinnaker pole, square instead of round. The team here with the tactician the helmsman, the guy on the main sheet, the guy on the jib, all in one ballet. That was the first year they introduced the microphones and the headphones, so the bow man can talk to the helmsman. And these were the days when they were still friendly. The Swiss were, in the Challenger races, were racing against Oracle from Larry Ellison. That's another version of a spinnaker pole, pre-formed. And what happened there, as I told you, in the final America's Cup races, the New Zealanders thought it was going to be light wind, and it wasn't. So the first thing they had to do in the very narrow boat, they had to make a little protection here for the water coming in, but that didn't work. The most sophisticated instrument was a plastic bucket on board. The guy was bailing on the back of the boat, hoping, but something else didn't work. So it was a whole disaster, and the Swiss were, as you remember, took the cup, won the cup. Interesting thing here, what the Swiss invented, the spinnaker pole goes into this well here, and so it's safe, it doesn't have to be secured, and it makes the boat more stable as well. There's two reasons for that. That was the last race with Russell Coutts sailing for the Swiss and Baker sailing for Team New Zealand. Again, that's the victory actually of the Louis Vuitton Cup, but you see the New Zealanders, where every third person has a boat. They were all in Auckland to celebrate the winner. And here's Alinghi, Ernesto Bertarelli with the cup. And as a little extra, I don't know if you remember, we had in 2001, we had the America's Cup boats as a demonstration. It was the UBS Cup, where the Oracle team, acrobatic team, was there showing off. These were the days. Everybody's asking, are they coming back in Newport? But the New York Yacht Club has to win it to take it back. It's not about just saying we're having it in Newport. So here are a few pictures of Newport. They were racing in the fog, and by the way, that's the old bridge here, that doesn't exist anymore. And so they had to change the whole race course up the bay. Rose Island. And of course, Alinghi won. 2007, fantastic city, the old city, and that was a river, and they changed that river into one big garden. There was most of the time no wind or little wind. The guys had to go up. There was a guy up on the mast just kicking the battens after they tacked. That's what you remember when I showed you the boats in Newport. That's the Alinghi base, and they had restaurants there. They had a spa. They had a workout place. They had meeting rooms. And all the Swiss, obviously, there's not many Swiss in the world. The Swiss came and so everybody's awake again. That's the second part, if you're just waking up. Big show, that was lots of money spent. The Swiss aerobatic team came to Spain and showed off. As you remember, it was a closed racing, but not all the time. The Swiss This time, that's just after the windward mark. The New Zealand team is just hoisting. That's a New Zealand spinnaker pole, and Alinghi is still coming to the windward mark. And that's Grant Dalton saying to the tactician, and that's Baker, the helmsman, he said, we have to win 2 more races and we won the America's Cup. And they kept racing, and the Swiss were ahead. It was fantastic because, again, with that thermal winds and good wind conditions. As you see by now, the spinnaker poles went from square to round to triangular. And this is the moment of the end of the race. It was at the windward mark, and Alinghi, oops, that's one too quick. Alinghi has a protest flag here. They're protesting the Team New Zealand who came too close. It didn't give them, because they're on starboard, they didn't give them space. So when they came for the finish, Team New Zealand had to do a 360, and when they finished, they crossed the finishing line, and the 3 guys here are still looking at the committee boat to see if the blue flag goes up or the yellow flag of the other boats. That's how close they were. And Pettarelli is already celebrating. He thinks they won, which they did by 1 meter. Big celebration when they came back into the harbor. That's the president of the club, of the Geneva Yacht Club, with Pettarelli. And I was there to take the pictures, went straight to the press office, sent the pictures to Switzerland, and this ad was in all the big Swiss newspapers the next day. And that's the last time they were looking at each other. 2010, completely different. Another challenge from through a loophole. Long story there, but as you know, there was Oracle came with a fixed wing, and Alinghi heard about it too late, and they didn't have a choice anymore. It was too late to make a fixed wing. It's so complicated to make, and Alinghi was deciding we're having a cat, and the cat with the big sail was obviously not as fast as a trimaran with the. That's the finish of the first race, and because the new rules came into play, the rules from 1851, there were only 3 races, and the winner of the first 2 races, or the winner of the first 2 races wins the America's Cup. So that's the first race, and then after the first race, that's Larry Ellison sailing the boat home with Spittel next to him. And for the second race, it was in February in Valencia, so it was about 40 degrees, and we were 3 hours in a helicopter with no doors. So we had quite a few layers, 3 pairs of socks and so on. But it was an incredible sight to see these 2 boats, completely different, one with a fixed wing, the other one with a soft sail, a cat against a trimaran. And as you see, the guys were on the windward hull here. Quite complicated, to say the least. These boats will never sail again. Alinghi was actually in the second race ahead, but then Oracle went just around Alinghi, and that was the end of that. If anybody has a question, you can ask right now, because maybe you don't remember the question at the end of the event. Luckily for us, the race got postponed. There was not enough wind for all the day, and when there was enough wind, it was just half an hour before the cutoff time, and it was great because it was the end of the afternoon, and as you see, the sun was low, and it was for us a great opportunity for photography. That's Oracle crossing the finish line. And that's Larry Ellison, his boat, and that's when I always ask which boat was more expensive of the two. One is 270 feet long and the other one has a wing sail. The president of the Sailing Club of Geneva is giving the cup to the Golden Gate Yacht Club in San Francisco. And that's Ernesto Bertarelli at the last press conference. In the meantime, Larry kisses the cup. That's Larry Spithill on the left and Kostecki on the right, the helmsman and the tactician. In 2013, another cup, but completely different. Larry Ellison spent another, they say 150 million, some say 300 million, depending which events you count. And everything changed, as you remember. These boats are 72 feet long, are cats with solid wings, and all the weight of that boat, of these boats, are on one little foil, which is the length of a surfboard. And the rule says the windward board has to be up, so they can't have boats down. But here you see, you have an idea how little that is, and the whole boat, and it's stabilized by the back. They have little winglets on the back rudder to stabilize those. And the technology is just mind-boggling. And obviously the speed, and there's absolutely no noise. That's Alcatraz, the island in San Francisco, and all the spectators. Was a perfect place to watch San Francisco. You could watch it from the shore, you could watch it from the bridge. And that's the museum in San Francisco, with the San Francisco Yacht Club in the background, the most frustrated club in the world, because a few years ago they said no to Larry Ellison and they could have the cup now. And 500 yards down the peninsula is the Golden Gate Yacht Club with the cup. That's the first mark after the start, and the speeds of these boats are just incredible. This is the finish. When they come across the finish line, they actually reach, and that's one mark of the finish. And here again, you see this is the board on the windward side, so the whole boat is on one of these boards, foils. That's just after the finish. They're giving us a show. That's how they start, just not too far from the bridge, so you can actually see it from the bridge when they start. They use the whole bay. That was the morning of the last race, and it was 8-8. The winner takes it all. It was really unbelievable, because you see the spectators on the first leg. Team New Zealand was ahead, but in the meantime, the Oracle learned how to foil upwind. And this is the finish and the victory. And this is Rome Kirby, Jerry Kirby's son. He's the only American on board. He's going to talk here in a few weeks. In May. And that gives you another shot of the foil. It's not that long, but a 72-foot cat is actually sailing on it. Victory celebration on the dock in San Diego, in San Francisco. The next cup might be in San Diego, by the way. Here are the main guys, the four guys. That's the strategic, the Slingbee, the helmsman, Spithill, Larry Ellison, and Ben Ainsley, who came on board late as a tactician. That's Larry Ellison, ready for the next cup, and he already hired Spithill for the next cup. And that gives you an idea if you want to run the America's Cup. It's not just a club saying come and challenge for the cup, which would be nice, and that's what happened in the 70s and 80s. Now they built this whole arena, and every second evening they had that's Journey, big bands playing there, and the whole America's Cup in San Francisco became like a circus. They had car exhibitions, they had restaurants, multiple restaurants, bars. It's just not about the sailing anymore, which is a little sad. And this is good old Shamrock from Newport about 25 years ago. And that's the last 40 years. Ice sailing. I was the photographer on the Swiss, UBS Switzerland, Swiss round the world boat for the Whitbread 27 years ago. I did from Uruguay to the last leg, Uruguay 31 days to England. That's with Ted Turner on Courageous. And on a press conference, I told Paul Kayar, why don't you take a picture of us? Gave him my camera. That's Dennis Conner, Sir Peter Blake. And that's it for tonight. So if you have any questions.
Where do you think the America's Cup is going next? I don't mean space, I mean in speed and type of boat.
Well, I was one of the old guard too, and said these new boats are the technology is much too crazy. But it was always about new boats and new technology and new sails, and now they just have to stick with it. They cannot go back to monohulls. It's the people are now. It's the short attention span. Instead of having a race which goes for 2.5 hours, these races go for 45 minutes because the TV is now telling them when to start and how long the races can be, and that's very sad. That's actually New Zealand was going to change all this, but the winner takes it all, and you can take it wherever you want, and whoever pays the most. It's a sad state. It's going to be in cats. It's going to be in 62-foot cats with wings. That's most likely the case. Other questions?
How did you get into sailing photography?
I grew up on a lake in Switzerland and sailed in dinghies and did an apprenticeship in a studio. My boss was I met him at the yacht club on the lake. So on Mondays we talked about the weekend racing, and on Friday we talked about the upcoming weekend racing. And so I worked in the studio, but I thought, then I went to Kiel Week, the biggest sailing week in the world, near Hamburg, in 71 for the first time, and then 72 were the Olympic Games there, so I did that. And I was writing stories in French and German for the magazines, and just thought it was more fun to make less money but more travel, and go to sailing events instead of working in a studio day and night.
What brand name camera do you use, and what's the most expensive camera you ever bought?
They were getting, digital was you said, oh, I don't have to buy Kodachrome anymore because a roll costs $16 one roll, and then $16 to process, so $30 for each roll. And you can make, I come back from a sailing week with about 40 rolls. So you can add that up for every sailing week. So we thought, oh, it's much cheaper now. We don't need film anymore. But the cameras now, well, the most expensive ones I had were $8,000 just for the body. And the lenses, I still have a $9,000 lens, 600 millimeter telephoto lens. And then the 400 millimeter is costs $5,000. But the cameras, the most expensive cameras are just faster and have better resolution. But it's amazing what you can do with a $350 camera. So I'm now, I have still the Mark III, the 5D Mark III is my main camera, and then 70D, all Canon for the last 40 years.
When did you start with digital?
Actually, at the America's Cup in 2000, well, I started in probably 2 years before. And the funny story about that is that when I started in 71, and so on, the next 10 years, the magazine couldn't afford to print in color, so I had one camera with black and white film and one with color, and I processed my own black and white, printed it, and sent the pictures around. And then in 1999, I had two cameras, one digital and one film, because the digital was not high resolution was not good enough for magazines, but I had to give the client a picture every day or pictures every day for the website. And so I took digital pictures for the websites and then film for the, even in 2001, I just remember I had two cameras, and slide film for the magazines to print. And then it's actually 2003 when Canon came out with the full format high resolution cameras. And the America's Cup in 2003 was the first one where I only did digital.
Why can't the America's Cup go back to the olden days?
It's just that the sponsors want eyes on the websites and on the television screen, and so you have to make it sexy for the viewers. And so if you go back with monohulls, it's just so slow. There's no action. There's no the races take too long, and there's much more happening if you have these fast boats, and you have 2 races a day, for instance, or 3 races a day. It's just a sad thing.
How many professional photographers would you say cover a Cup race?
Well, if you look in the big media center, there were about 40 photographers. But there's a lot of agencies and newspapers and magazines. They send their own, and then websites send their own photographers. But there were more actually before that, before digital, because they couldn't distribute the pictures so easily. So every magazine, every newspaper had to send their own photographer, and all the agencies. There were more agencies as well.
So are you a freelance, or are you hired by a
Time
magazine?
Well, I'm freelance, and I get hired for the events. Or with Bill Koch, I was 1.5 years, 2 years, 92, and I do the Rolex events. And so I have a contract with Rolex, where just every year they give me a new contract for the sailing events they do, like the Sydney Hobart and the Rolex Big Boat Series in San Francisco, and the Rolex Fastnet race. So I do those for Rolex.
How was the leg of the Woodward that you did?
It was. Do you have time? That's a long story, but it was 31 days and 27 years ago, and I keep saying after 15 days I was ready to go to a restaurant and read a newspaper and have an espresso. But it was the last time. It was we were on an 80-footer, the maxi boats, and we actually had a fridge on board and a freezer on board, and we had. I can do a whole story on the Whitbread and Volvo race. We had only the Swiss had that. We had a table inside which was gabled, so there was a table and 2 benches, and the whole was on U-shaped rails. So the cook's job was to tack the table. So when we tacked, the table was like this, so it just moved, slid it this way. So we always sat down on a table and had a decent meal. While now with the Volvo Ocean Race, it's all they have 2 or 3 water desalinators on board, and everything is freeze-dried. It's all about the weight, but we were lucky at that time. It was in comfort. Yes?
In one of your books there, it's in French, so I don't know, it's sort of dark. I see wonderful pictures of the windsurfers, I guess they were.
Yes, just the wave jumping in Hawaii. Yeah, that was in Hokipa. There was a period like actually 20 years ago where that's when they started to do wave jumping and loops. And there were the first loops, and now there was 3 loops with a windsurfer and a sail including. So I went there and in spring and in October for the windsurfing events in Hokipa, in Maui, and in Kailua on the north shore of Hawaii. But now they're doing it with kite surfing, so it's different sport. Any other questions?
Where would you say the most challenging climate for racing in the world would be today? Would it be Perth?
Well, it was the Rolex Sydney Hobart race is definitely the most challenging one right now, because you have 3 days racing, and one of the days you have 30 knots. I did it this year for the 14th time in a helicopter, not in a boat, and we had 45 knots of wind. There's always a front coming through, so it's either at the start or down in Tasmania where the wind picks up. And you can go to regattanews.com, that's where the Rolex pictures are.
Were you really on the spreader in that picture from?
Yes, indeed. I have a picture to prove it. No, but yeah, that's my shadow. That's my right there. But I can say I was in a harness. You don't climb the mast by yourself. So they pull you up on the harness, and then the harness, and then I just go outside the spreader and hang on to the rigging when I take the pictures. And since you're asking, do you remember the big boat that had 160 foot? The New Zealand boat had a 160-foot mast. And when it was built and just ready to go, I went to New Zealand for a German magazine, and it was in the harbor, and I said, can I go up on top of the mast to take a picture? Not while it was sailing. And the guy said yes, and he put me in a harness, put me on a rope, and then he put another rope on my harness, and I said, what's this rope for? And he says, this is to get you back down. Because if you're up there, the weight of the rope they just pulled you up is heavier than yourself, so they have to have another rope to pull you down. So that's my harness story. Yes?
When you're in a precarious situation like that, is your camera secured with some kind of a harness? Or
Well, well, it's just around my neck, basically, the camera. I have it around two cameras, always 2 cameras with 2 lenses, so I don't have to change. I don't have to change camera lenses when I'm up there, or it wasn't only once when I'm up there and there's no batteries or there's no card in the camera, so I always have a second. Anybody else? This concludes.